bobcat was barely clinging to life, its battered body lying motionless near the edge of a backcountry road, too weak to cry out, too broken to move. Most drivers would have passed by, but one man, on his way to a divorce court hearing he'd been preparing for months, spotted the injured bobcat and stopped. Kneeling beside the animal, he offered it water from his bottle cap, and to his surprise, the bobcat weakly drank. As he stood to leave, the bobcat reached out with its paws and clung to his arm, its eyes with a quiet desperation that seemed to be begging for his help. The man, with important court waiting, he hesitated. He had every reason to keep going, to face the courtroom, to fight for what was left. He faced an impossible choice that could cost him his house, his savings, and everything he'd worked for. But what this bobcat would give him in return was something far more precious than anything he could lose. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning fog hung low over the Tennessee mountains as Robert Mitchell drove his pickup down Highway 441, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. In 3 hours, he'd be standing in a Knoxville courtroom, watching 15 years of marriage dissolve into property divisions and custody arrangements. The folder on his passenger seat held everything: bank statements, house deeds, the pre-trial agreement his lawyer had spent months negotiating. Everything that once meant something reduced to paper. He'd left early to avoid traffic, taking the back roads through the Great Smoky Mountains rather than the interstate. Maybe it was masochism driving past the cabin where he'd proposed to Sarah all those years ago. Or maybe he just needed the mountains' indifference, their ancient reminder that human troubles were temporary things. The shape on the road's shoulder almost didn't register at first. Just another piece of roadkill in a stretch notorious for wildlife collisions. But something about the stillness made him slow down. The way the morning light caught the tawny fur, the unnatural angle of the body against the gravel. Robert pulled over, his hazard lights clicking in the quiet morning. 20 feet away, he could see it clearly now. A bobcat, maybe 30 pounds, lying motionless where the asphalt met the grass. Fresh blood matted its side, and one hind leg bent at an angle that made his stomach turn. He should have driven on. The court appearance was mandatory. His lawyer had been clear about that, but Robert found himself walking closer, his dress shoes crunching on the gravel. The bobcat's chest rose, barely perceptible, but there, still alive. "Hey there," he said softly, stopping 5 feet away. In his work as a park ranger years ago, before the desk job, before the marriage, he'd learned to read injured wildlife. This one was beyond help, he thought. Internal injuries, probably. Shock setting in. The kindest thing would be to call animal control, let them end its suffering humanely. The bobcat's eye, the one not swollen shut, tracked his movement. Not with the wild panic he expected, but with something else. Exhaustion, maybe. Resignation. Robert unscrewed his water bottle, poured a small amount into the cap. A futile gesture, but he couldn't just stand there. He set it near the bobcat's mouth, careful to keep his distance. Bobcats, even dying ones, had claws and teeth designed for survival. To his surprise, a pink tongue emerged, lapping weakly at the water. 3 small sips before the effort became too much. "That's it," Robert said. "Good cat." He stood, brushing gravel from his dress pants. The court clerk would start calling cases at 9. His phone showed 7:45. If he left now, drove fast, he might still make it. The movement was so unexpected he almost stumbled backward. The bobcat had lifted one front paw, trembling with effort, and placed it on his shoe. not aggressively, gently, like a house cat asking for attention. "I can't," Robert said, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. "I have to go." He took a step back. The paw followed, reaching further, catching the hem of his pants. The bobcat's eye, golden green in the morning light, locked with his. And in that moment, Robert saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Not animal instinct, not fear, but a conscious plea. The bobcat knew it was dying, and it didn't want to die alone. "Damn it," Robert whispered. He looked at his phone again, looked at the folder in his truck, thought about Sarah's lawyer, about the mediator, about the house they'd both wanted to keep. Then he shrugged off his suit jacket, the expensive one Sarah had bought him for their 10th anniversary, and carefully wrapped it around the bobcat. The animal didn't resist as he lifted it, though he could feel its rapid heartbeat through the fabric. It weighed less than his daughter's golden retriever, all lean muscle and surprisingly soft fur where it wasn't matted with blood. The nearest wildlife rehabilitation center was 40 minutes in the opposite direction from court. Robert laid the bundled bobcat on his passenger seat, moving the divorce papers to the floor. "Hang on," he said, starting the engine. "Just hang on." The Smoky Mountain Wildlife Rehabilitation Center sat on 20 acres of donated land, its main building a converted barn that had seen better days. Robert carried his bundle through the front door, setting off a bell that brought a woman in scrubs running from the back. "Bobcat," he said simply. "Hit by a car, maybe an hour ago, maybe more." The woman, her name tag read Doctor. Jennifer Walker, was already unwrapping the jacket, her hands quick and professional. "Treatment room 2, she called to someone Robert couldn't see. Then to him. "You did right bringing it here. Most people would have driven by." "Will it survive?" Dr. Walker was already moving, the bobcat now on a wheeled gurney. "We'll do everything we can. Leave your contact information with Maria at the desk." And then she was gone, disappearing through double doors marked "Staff Only." Robert stood there, his suit jacket bloody, his phone showing 17 missed calls. The court hearing would be starting in 10 minutes. Maria, a college-aged volunteer with kind eyes, handed him a clipboard. "Sir, we need some information about where you found the animal." He filled out the form mechanically, his handwriting shaky. At the bottom, where it asked for a donation, he wrote a check for $500. Money he couldn't really spare, not with the divorce. "Can I?" He started, then stopped. "Can I find out what happens to it?" Maria smiled. "Of course. Dr. Walker will call you with an update. These cats are tough. Don't give up hope." The divorce hearing proceeded without him. His absence meant forfeiting certain rights, his lawyer informed him in a scathing voicemail. Sarah got the house, the better car, more time with their daughter Emily. Assets he'd fought to protect were divided in his absence. "I hope whatever emergency you had was worth it," the lawyer said. Robert thought about the bobcat's paw on his shoe, that desperate reach for connection, and couldn't honestly say if it was or not. 3 days later, Dr. Walker called. "Your bobcat made it through surgery," she said. "Fractured pelvis, internal bleeding, severe dehydration. But he's a fighter. We've got him stable." "He?" "Young male, about 2 years old, just reaching breeding age. He's lucky you found him when you did. Another hour and..." She trailed off. "Anyway, I wanted you to know. Can I visit?" There was a pause. "That's unusual. We try to limit human contact with our wild patients." The goal is release, and we don't want them associating people with food or safety. I understand, Robert said, though disappointment sat heavy in his chest. But, Dr. Walker continued, you could volunteer. We always need help with the other animals, and you'd be able to check on him from a distance. Which is how Robert found himself the following Saturday, cleaning enclosures and preparing specialized diets for injured raptors, orphaned raccoons, and a particularly cantankerous opossum named Theodore. The work was hard, messy, and nothing like his corporate job analyzing insurance claims. He loved every minute of it. The Bobcat, the staff had started calling him Russell after the road where he was found, was kept in the medical ward, visible through a large window. Robert would pause there during his shifts, watching the cat sleep, its chest rising and falling steadily. The leg was splinted, the wounds bandaged. It looked so small on the medical bed, nothing like the fierce predator it was meant to be. 2 weeks into his volunteer work, something unexpected happened. Robert was cleaning the adjoining room when he heard commotion from the medical ward. Dr. Walker and 2 technicians were trying to examine Russell, who had finally gained enough strength to resist. He won't let us near him, one tech said, backing away from the snarling cat. Yesterday, he was fine, but today... Robert watched through the window as Russell struggled against the light restraints, his golden eyes wild with panic. Without thinking, Robert knocked on the door. "Let me try," he said. Dr. Walker looked skeptical. "Robert, he's a wild animal. Just because you rescued him doesn't mean..." "Please." Maybe it was something in his voice. Or maybe doctor. Walker was just desperate, but she nodded. "Gloves and face shield. Move slowly. If he shows any sign of aggression, you back out immediately." Robert entered the room, his heart pounding. Russell's head swiveled toward him, ears flat against his skull. But the snarling stopped. "Hey, buddy," Robert said softly, the same tone he'd used on the roadside. "Remember me?" Russell's ears slowly rose. The tension in his body eased, though his eyes remained watchful. "That's it," Robert continued, taking a slow step forward. "Just need to check your bandages. Make sure you're healing up good." To everyone's amazement, Russell allowed Robert to approach. When Robert carefully extended his gloved hand, the Bobcat sniffed it, then gave a small chirp, a sound Dr. Walker later explained was typically reserved for Bobcat mothers and their kittens. "I'll be damned," she said. From that day forward, Russell would only cooperate with medical procedures if Robert was present. It defied everything the rehabilitation center stood for. Wild animals weren't supposed to bond with humans. But Russell's recovery depended on regular treatment, and if Robert's presence made that possible, Dr. Walker reluctantly agreed to bend the rules. "Just remember," she warned, "he's not a pet. When he's healed, he goes back to the wild. That's what's best for him." Robert nodded, though something in his chest tightened at the thought. The weeks turned into months. Russell graduated from the medical ward to a small outdoor enclosure, then to a larger habitat with logs to climb and a small pool to wade through. His leg healed remarkably well, though he'd always have a slight limp. Not enough to prevent release, Dr. Walker assured them, but noticeable. Robert came every day after work, and all day on weekends. He'd sit outside Russell's enclosure, reading paperwork or just watching the Bobcat explore his temporary territory. Russell would often position himself as close to Robert as the fence allowed, purring, a sound that could be heard from several feet away. "You know, Bobcats don't usually purr like house cats," Jennifer told him one afternoon. It's typically reserved for mothers with kittens or during mating. This level of vocalization toward a human, I've never seen it. Maybe he's just grateful, Robert suggested. Jennifer shook her head. Animals don't feel gratitude the way we understand it. But something's happening here. Some kind of recognition, maybe. Connection. The other volunteers started calling them the odd couple. The divorced insurance analyst and the wild Bobcat who wouldn't start his physical therapy exercises unless Robert was there to encourage him. Videos of their interactions, carefully filmed to avoid showing Robert's face at his request, went viral on the rehabilitation center's social media, bringing in unprecedented donations. "You're famous," Emily told him during one of their weekend visits. His daughter, now 13, had initially been angry about the divorce, about him missing the hearing. But seeing him with Russell had changed something. "My friends think it's cool that my dad saved a bobcat." "I didn't save him," Robert said, watching Russell successfully catch a live rat. Practice for his eventual release. "We saved each other." Emily rolled her eyes in that teenage way, but she was smiling. It was during a routine physical exam in October, 6 months after finding Russell, that Robert's world shifted again. He'd been feeling tired lately, attributing it to the long hours between his day job and the rehabilitation center. Some dizzy spells, but nothing serious. "We need to run more tests," his doctor said, her face carefully neutral. "The blood work shows some abnormalities." The tests led to scans. The scans led to a specialist. The specialist led to a small, sterile room where an oncologist explained about pancreatic cancer, about stages, about treatment options that sounded more like buying time than finding cures. "How long?" Robert asked, surprised at how steady his voice sounded. "With treatment, possibly a year, maybe 18 months. Without, 3 to 6 months. Robert thought about Russell, scheduled for release in the spring. Thought about Emily, about the life he'd built in the ruins of his marriage. Thought about the chemo his mother had endured for 2 agonizing years before the cancer won anyway. "I need to think," he said. He drove straight to the rehabilitation center, not bothering to change out of his work clothes. Russell was pacing his enclosure, as he often did at dusk, wild instincts stirring with the approaching darkness. But when he spotted Robert, he came immediately to the fence, chirping that peculiar greeting. "Hey, buddy," Robert said, sitting heavily on the bench they'd installed for his visits. "We need to talk." He told Russell everything, about the diagnosis, about the time frame, about the fear that sat cold in his stomach. The Bobcat listened, head tilted, golden eyes never leaving Robert's face. "The thing is," Robert continued, "I don't know what to do. Treatment might give me more time, but what kind of time? Sick, weak, not able to come see you, not able to see you released." Russell made a low, rumbling sound. Not quite a purr, not quite a growl. He pressed against the fence, as close to Robert as he could get. "Yeah," Robert said, reaching his fingers through to scratch behind Russell's ears, something Dr. Walker had given up telling him not to do. "That's what I thought too." He chose quality over quantity. No treatment, but all the time he had left would be his own. He quit his job. What was the point of insurance when you're dying? And used his savings to make a large donation to the rehabilitation center, ensuring Russell's care no matter what happened. Dr. Walker cried when he told her, professional detachment crumbling. "Robert, you should fight this. Russell's going to be released in a few months anyway." "Then I want to be there for it," Robert said. "I want to see him run free. That's worth more to me than a few extra months hooked to machines. As winter descended on the mountains, Robert's world narrowed to what mattered. Time with Emily, who'd moved in with him against Sarah's initial protests. Hours at the rehabilitation center, not just with Russell, but with all the animals who needed care. And the surprising peace that came with accepting the inevitable. Russell seemed to sense the change. He became more affectionate, if such a word could apply to a wild bobcat. During the supervised interaction sessions, Dr. Walker had finally approved. For Russell's psychological well-being, she'd said, though everyone knew it was as much for Robert. The bobcat would rest his head on Robert's lap, purring so loudly it vibrated through both their bodies. "He knows," Maria said one day, watching them together. Animals always know. By February, Robert couldn't hide the weight loss anymore, the way simple tasks left him breathless. The rehabilitation center staff quietly rearranged schedules so he could visit Russell without the long walk to the enclosure. They brought a comfortable chair, said it was for all the volunteers, though everyone knew better. Russell's release was scheduled for March 15th, the first day of spring. He was fully healed, hunting successfully, showing all the behaviors necessary for survival in the wild. The plan was to transport him to a protected area in the national park, far from roads, with plenty of prey and no human habitation for miles. On March 10th, Robert collapsed at home. Emily found him on the kitchen floor, conscious but unable to stand. The ambulance ride, the hospital admission, the gentle way the nurses spoke. It all blurred together. Days, the hospice doctor said. Maybe a week. Russell's release is in 5 days, Robert told Emily. I promised I'd be there. His daughter, so much stronger than any 13-year-old should have to be, squeezed his hand. I'll talk to Dr. Walker. What Jennifer Walker did next would be debated in wildlife rehabilitation circles for years. She loaded Russell into a transport carrier and drove him to the hospice center. She filled out paperwork claiming it was a therapeutic animal visit, not entirely a lie, and somehow convinced the staff to allow a wild bobcat into a dying man's room. 10 minutes, she told Robert, who lay propped up in bed, barely recognizable as the man who'd brought her an injured bobcat 9 months ago. That's all I can give you. But when she opened the carrier, Russell didn't bolt or hide. He emerged slowly, cautiously, his nostrils flaring at the medical smells. Then he saw Robert. The sound Russell made was unlike anything Jennifer had heard in 20 years of wildlife work. Not a chirp, not a purr, but something deeper, more primal. He jumped onto the bed, 30 pounds of wild predator, and curled against Robert's side with the delicacy of a house cat. Hey, buddy, Robert whispered, his hand finding the soft fur behind Russell's ears. You ready to go home? Russell purred, the vibration traveling through Robert's fragile body like a benediction. They stayed like that, man and bobcat, while Jennifer quietly extended 10 minutes to 20, then 30. I need you to do something for me, Robert said finally, his voice barely audible. I need you to live, really live. Hunt, find a mate, have kits, be wild, be free. That's what I want for you. Russell lifted his head, those golden eyes meeting Robert's one last time. Then, as if understanding, he touched his nose to Robert's cheek, a gesture so gentle, so deliberately careful, that Jennifer had to turn away. They released Russell as planned on March 15th. Robert had died 3 days earlier, early morning, his daughter holding one hand and his sister the other. He'd been peaceful at the end, Emily reported, talking about mountain mornings and the sound of purring. Dr. Walker and a small group from the rehabilitation center made the trek to Russell's release site. The carrier door opened, and Russell emerged into the dappled sunlight of the forest. He paused at the threshold between captivity and freedom, looking back at the gathered humans. Then he was gone, melting into the understory with the fluid grace his species had perfected over millennia. But those who were there swore they heard it carried back on the wind. A single chirp, the same greeting he'd reserved for one special human. The mountains keep their secrets, but sometimes, if you know where to look, you can see the evidence of bonds that shouldn't exist but do anyway. In the thriving bobcat population of the park, in the young woman who became a veterinarian, in the rehabilitation center that saves dozens of animals each year with funds from a memorial that started with one man stopping for one injured cat on a morning when he had every reason to drive on by.